Hi, I'm Trinell and I am pregnant. I am pregnant with my rainbow baby. So excited. I'm actually in my 3rd trimester as I'm recording this video. Don't even ask why I'm making this first trimester recap so late, but we moved, we're here. And I really want to talk about my first trimester. I want to look back on those first initial moments and tell you guys all about my experience when I first newly became pregnant. Also, just a disclaimer, my experience will likely be very different from your experience. If you can't relate to any of the things that I share, don't think that you're weird. Just remember that every pregnancy is different, every woman is different, every baby is different. So your experience is going to be different than mine. And I already know that my experience is quite unique, and you'll see why further along in the video. First, I want to talk about how I found out that I was pregnant. I did a whole video showcasing when I first found out I was pregnant ever, and then every other time I got pregnant after, until this very time that I'm pregnant now with this, my rainbow baby. I call this pregnancy my rainbow baby just because it is my pregnancy after miscarriage. I have a whole video about my miscarriage story if you're interested in that. I'll leave the card up above here. And then also, if you want to see my reaction to finding out that I was pregnant those earlier times and talking about finding out I'm pregnant now, you can check out this video. But in short, just to give you a little bit more detail about the exact moment that I found out. When I first found out that I was pregnant, I was at home. I decided to test myself. I believe it was like a day before I left for my brother's wedding, which was in Jamaica. And I just decided, you know what, I just want to know. So I tested myself. It was either the day before I left or 2 days before. I want to say it's 2 days before. So I tested myself using a Dollar Tree pregnancy test, and I ended up testing positive. I did end up going in to see my doctor to confirm whether I was or wasn't, and thankfully I was. I confirmed that via blood test. And honestly, actually, let me talk about this too. When I tested, I want to say I used the pregnancy test at home one day, and the next day I took a blood test in the office. And when the nurse called me for the results, that I believe was the day before leaving to go to Jamaica. I answered the call at work because at the time I was working in person, and the nurse basically said like, oh, you're technically pregnant, but based on your HCG, it still is sort of this gray area where we'd like to see it higher at this point that I supposedly was, according to the last day of my first period. Turns out I am very much pregnant, still very much pregnant. It was a successful pregnancy. That was confirmed a week later, again, through a blood test where my HCG significantly rose. I'll insert here a clip of my first ultrasound when they checked baby once they confirmed via blood that everything was a-okay. My first reactions to being pregnant were excitement. Because of that news from the nurse, I was a bit worried just because I saw my at-home test. I believed that I was pregnant, but of course, medical professionals know stuff. And again, I was traveling, so she was like, just be careful in Jamaica. Be aware if you may start bleeding or cramping, just look out for that. So I feel like she placed a little bit of doubt in my mind about whether I was actually gonna remain pregnant. Other than that, I was super excited. We were super excited. We kind of celebrated throughout the Jamaica trip, and I treated myself like I was pregnant, like no alcohol, which I haven't really drank like that since getting pregnant my very first time in 2022. But yeah, I was just like treading softly and being mindful of what I was putting in my body and doing all that I could to be as healthy as possible, even though I was in that gray area. But I was super excited. My husband was super excited. Let's talk about early symptoms. This topic is quite interesting to talk about for me, just because contrary to what I thought and contrary to what is typically talked about, I didn't really have symptoms before I found out or throughout this entire first trimester slash this entire pregnancy thus far. And that is absolutely baffling to me, I know. I kept track of my symptoms every time I got pregnant. Again, I've gotten pregnant now. This is the 4th time. And I've also not been pregnant for some of those months in between my last loss and this current pregnancy. So I've monitored my symptoms of when I was pregnant and when I'm not. And honestly, once you look for symptoms, you sometimes see the same symptoms even when you're not pregnant that you did when you were pregnant. But this pregnancy, I didn't notice anything. I'll just bring up my notes. That's where I keep track of all my symptoms and things related to pregnancy and, you know, life. In my notes, I don't have anything written for before I actually tested positive. Again, I was looking out for symptoms. I just didn't feel anything. I wasn't emotional, which I've previously found in other pregnancies. I wasn't peeing a lot, super fatigued, none of those things. However, starting at week 4, I do have here some physical changes. My were hard. I had some acne on my chin, which is an unusual spot for me to have acne. I was slightly fatigued, and then I had some right side twinges, pelvic twinges that feel like a little bit of a pinch, not painful at all. Those are the symptoms that I recall week 4. Week 5, I had the same symptoms. By week 6, and this is the last time I recorded symptoms, I had extreme fatigue in the morning around 11 a.m. I said. But again, for context, I was working in person at the time. I was actually traveling 2 hours one way just about to get to work, and I worked from 7:30 to 5 p.m. So all of that driving, I think, is what actually caused the fatigue, plus pregnancy perhaps, but I think it really was the driving, the commute, the long hours. So just keep that in mind on the fatigue part. I wrote that I had watery discharge down there, and that my nipples were like semi-hard. So before they were super hard, but they softened up by week 6. I reported that I had a little bit of bloating, I had dry, peely skin, and I had some chin acne still. So those are my symptoms. Week 6 was the last first trimester week that I recorded symptoms for, and that's because after then I stopped feeling anything. And none of those symptoms I would say are negative symptoms in the sense of you typically hear things like morning sickness. I did not have any of that. I was not in any pain. I'm still not in any pain, thankfully. I didn't have any cravings. Just so many things that typically you hear of that happen in the first trimester I did not experience. Only those that I mentioned just now were symptoms that I felt in my first trimester. And let me just say, I'm truly grateful for that experience. I do not take it lightly. I do know this is an exception to most people's pregnancy experience, and so I just want to acknowledge that. I want to answer the question about whether I had any concerns or worries this time around in my pregnancy, and honestly, yes, there were always some concerns and worries because of my pregnancy journey, the fact that I've had losses before, and the fact that I've been down this rodeo. My first pregnancy, I found out that he had stopped growing when he was 6 weeks along. I was 10 weeks along. It took me until getting to those later appointments for me to actually feel better and feel comfortable and to trust that this pregnancy was going to go all the way. I tried to frame my mind to think positively. I wasn't in a constant state of worry because honestly, worrying doesn't change anything. I just tried to stay in my word, in the Bible, prayer, thinking more positively about my life, my experience. I didn't announce the news to my family in a creative way this time just because we've been down this rodeo before, and honestly, if you've suffered pregnancy loss and you've announced your first few pregnancies that ended in loss, you probably can relate to what I'm saying. The surprise is no longer there. The excitement is no longer there for family members, in my opinion. I've told the same few people, like my immediate family, about the news, and their reaction was not as dramatic as it was the first time. and that's just life. And I feel like they too are kind of, I don't say skeptical, but they too kind of tread lightly in terms of getting their hopes up for me and for this baby. And so their reactions were, of course, happy for us, happy for me and my husband, happy for this baby, but not over the moon dramatic or completely surprised, because almost everyone that we told initially who were close friends and family knew that we were actively trying and knew that we had suffered loss in the past. So they were kind of expecting this news sooner or later, if that makes sense. Now I want to talk about my prenatal appointments. I actually had quite a few prenatal appointments very early on, starting when I first tested positive. I think my experience is unique because of my history of pregnancy loss. So I had quite a few of those. In my first trimester, I had, I want to say, 1 or 2 ultrasounds. I had quite a few appointments at my actual OB's office, which I'm currently working with, and those were cool. Like, I found comfort in seeing our baby move. And I remember, I think it was the ultrasound at week 12, which is towards the end of your first trimester. We actually got to see our baby, and I say we, meaning me and my husband, got to see our baby move. The baby was moving, kicking. It was just a lot. And seeing that and seeing it so plainly touched my heart. I'm not an emotional person, so I didn't shed any tears, but like, it could have brought me to tears. Like, it was just such a beautiful moment to see, to watch, to witness. So yeah, I want to talk about my work situation and being pregnant. So I actually started a job right before I conceived, and I quit my job like towards the end of my first trimester. Honestly, if I wasn't pregnant, I probably would have stayed in my job longer, but my plan was to exit eventually just because the commute was long. Pregnant or not pregnant, it was just a lot, and the hours were long as well. So the rest of my first trimester / the rest of my pregnancy, I've been unemployed, focused on baby, focused on my doctoral studies. If you didn't know, I am a PhD student as well. I'm in my 8th year, so we've been in this thing for way too long. I'm still working on things and not quite yet at the finish line, and so I've been focused on that, but mainly baby since quitting my job. I can't speak on managing working while pregnant just because I quit so soon, but honestly, for me, what made me quit while I was in my first trimester was literally the fatigue. I would come home and crash on the couch. No dinner was being made, nothing was being cleaned, nothing else was being done in my day. I would just come home and crash. And I felt like it was a commute plus my pregnancy killing my energy. There was so much other things, including YouTube, that I wanted to work on after work hours that I knew I couldn't if I kept my job. And also for the safety of my baby, being that I've suffered loss, I was truly not trying to do anything that was going to jeopardize my pregnancy. And my doctors did not say that working or commuting long would, but there are risks to driving, period, pregnant or not. And your body is more fragile, is more fatigued during pregnancy. And so I'm like waking up early, driving long hours, working long, and then driving home tired, getting home and doing the same thing over and over again for 5 days a week is not good. I'm not getting adequate sleep. I'm not getting replenished. It was just too much. So I made a decision for myself. I am married. My husband does work full time. Not everyone, if you're watching this, can even do this or has that option. And honestly, it's been rough in terms of bills and prepping for the baby with one income, but God is good. We have been managing, and honestly, our family and friends, shout out to my friends, have been super helpful in terms of getting us everything that we need. I'll talk more about this in my later trimester recap / baby shower vlog, but yeah, just they've been amazing. So I haven't necessarily been in lack throughout this pregnancy, although I haven't been working. In terms of like diet and things I've been taking this pregnancy, number one, prenatals, highly recommended. You should be taking prenatals if you're pregnant, but even if you're trying to conceive, doctors do recommend taking prenatals before you test positive. Doesn't hurt, of course. These are just vitamins, so all it is giving you more things that your body will need to prepare for a baby and carry a baby. I personally take Ritual. I'm going to reach out to them to get a coupon code, and if I do, I'll leave it down below here for you all. But yeah, highly recommend Ritual. I chose Ritual because it was organic and vegan and all those things, and that's right up my alley in terms of how I live my life and the foods I put in my body. So it just made sense for me to find a prenatal that matched that. But just keep in mind, they are pretty expensive. I believe it's about $35 a month, and it is a subscription, though they are also sold in Target. So those are your two options. That's what I take. I also take a thyroid medication because one of the things that the doctor noticed very early on in my pregnancy, because they tested a lot of things, was that my thyroid was underactive. So I take a thyroid medication to, I guess, stimulate my thyroid or keep it in check. I don't actually know what it does, but that's also what I take and what I've taken during my first trimester and throughout the rest of my pregnancy. Other resources that I recommend for the first trimester is getting a pregnancy journal. I'll leave a link to the one that I was gifted throughout my pregnancy and some other ones that I think are super cute. Pregnancy goes by so much faster than you probably think. It went faster than I thought, and I feel like, especially if it's your first time, you should document the experience. So I highly recommend a pregnancy journal. We will be finding out the gender in my second trimester, so I'll talk about that in my second trimester recap video, as well as in the gender reveal video that I post, and it will be very, very soon. My advice to all the women in the first trimester is that things do get better. Trust your body. Trust that every pregnancy is different. Definitely look up the different natural remedies like ginger for things like morning sickness. I did hear that that helps tremendously, and just find a support system and lean on them, especially if you're worried about possible loss. Definitely find your support system because people are there to help you. Since I'm no longer in my first trimester, I will insert pictures here of how my bump looked in my first trimester. Hopefully I took a few pictures, because honestly that's another recommendation that I have. Take more pictures throughout your whole pregnancy, but especially in your first trimester, because your body changes so quickly, and honestly if you don't document it, you probably won't even remember / notice just how much it's changed. So definitely do that. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope that it was helpful in getting a sense of how a first trimester could be like, or specifically a first trimester after loss, or even specifically a first trimester that has barely any symptoms. Hopefully it gives you insight in the fact that it is possible to have a symptom-free pregnancy, pain-free pregnancy, because that's basically what I was blessed with, and I'm so grateful. Again, not to boast, just to give you this other side that is not typically talked about on social media. Thank you again for watching. Subscribe if you want to follow me on this journey to motherhood, and I'll see you in my next video.